My name is Manny Carnero, C-A-R-N-E-R-O. My title, military-wise, is Lieutenant Colonel of Infantry, and I got also the title of Doctor of Law. And in 1946, right after World War II, two of my friends suggested that I go along with them and enlist in the Navy. I really didn't know what was happening, but I went along with them. They were of age. They altered my birth certificate, and the Navy accepted me, and I was told to report on a month later. I went down there. The chief petty officer found that my birth certificate, my date of birth was not correct. He checked it against what they call the borough books in New York, and just almost physically threw me out. And next door was the Marine Corps, and without question they took me. The next thing I know, I was on my way to Parris Island, South Carolina, and that was an experience. The Marine Corps in those days, training was extremely difficult. And following that, my experience in the Marines, and stayed in the Marine Corps for 10 years, and I was commissioned, and but they had a program where the commissioned officers that didn't go to Annapolis, etc., or OCS, had to revert back to their highest enlisted rank, and my highest enlisted rank at that time was Staff Sergeant. And so I looked around and went to the Air Force, and the Air Force were going to send me to what they call a NAVCAT program, Navigation Cadet Training Program, and I saw in that it was like going through the Marine Corps boot training again. And but the Army accepted me with time and grade, and I spent another 20 years in the service, so a total of 30 years, 9 months.
Wow, it's a long time. So you didn't really know what you were getting yourself into?
Not at the outset, no. I didn't even have a high school diploma, and but the military was good to me. I earned my high school diploma in the Marine Corps. And after I was commissioned in the Army, I received my baccalaureate degree, and I received 2 master's degrees. And after retirement, I went to law school and received a doctorate's degree. So educationally, I was pretty well rewarded in the military. One of my last assignments, let me see, I went to language school at Monterey, California, and they sent me to the Command and General Staff College, and then they sent me to the language school with an assignment to South America. I was inadvertently assigned to the Asian language department, and I was taking the Thai language. I was into my 8th month of the language when branch, that is the infantry branch, wanted me into the Spanish language course for an assignment at one of the embassies in South America. And so I ended up finishing 2 courses, one the Thai language and the Spanish language. The assignment to South America, where I would have used the Spanish language, fell through, and I ended up going to Thailand. And then they had a few problems in Thailand, and so the assignment was canceled, and I ended up on the faculty at the Command and General Staff College right back. And following that assignment, a little more than a year later, I had an opportunity for what they call a Department of Army level assignment. It was really important for commissioned officers, and I was a lieutenant colonel then. And so it was an opportunity I took in exchange for letting me or my family stay at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. Prior to that, we moved at least once a year, different locations, so it was hard on the family. So they allowed me to stay in quarters at Fort Leavenworth, the same quarters I had when I was on the faculty at the Command and General Staff College. They it was the Department of Army Regional Representative to the Federal Aviation, then called agency. And I had an office in Des Plaines, Illinois, and another one in Kansas City, Missouri. So it was commuting back and forth. And I held that job until I retired. I volunteered to retire because my oldest daughter, Mary, a very, very attractive young lady, and I came home for lunch one day. My office was in Kansas City, and to Leavenworth, and my car was parked on the street, and there were a couple of MPs, and I thought, well, wow, something happened. But I know that they were attracted by her. So I thought, well, it's time to retire. So we retired and selected Houston as a place I wanted to retire because during the Korean War, I had my hands and feet frostbitten. So inclement cold weather was difficult. Mm-hmm. And I had an assignment at in San Antonio, Texas. I was chief of plans and operations there, and that was during the anti-war years, and that's why they needed, and I was an infantry officer there, to stop them from entering the base at Fort Sam Houston. And that's how we selected Houston to retire. And that was in 1977, latter part of 1977. We've been living in the same place for all those many years.
Wow.
And my first period of employment was at Edward A. Furr High School. I was teaching there. It was an experience that I never had. It was like being back in the Marine Corps, discipline and things like that. And so I decided to go to law school, and went to law school there, and did that for 30 years. And I'm here sitting talking to you now.
Fantastic. Sounds like an interesting life thus far.
So roller coaster ride.
Roller coaster, that's right. So let's go back to the time of your deployment to Korea. So can you tell me a little bit about this? Whenever you got news you were going to Korea, had you heard of the country? Did you know where it was?
No, I didn't, and I wasn't alone. The vast majority at that time, well, when news broke out about the Korean War, it was, we didn't know what involvement we would have, but then the word got around. I was with the 2nd Marine Division at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, and and I was a sergeant then, and they sent us to Camp Pendleton. They were forming the 7th Regiment, 1st Marine Division, and the majority of the people that were in my regiment, 7th Regiment, were reservists that were being recalled back to active duty because of the Korean War. And I was assigned, there were, well, I'm going to tell you that, everyone knew, not everyone knew, but they knew everyone was going to be assigned before they went through the process of asking you, what would you like to do and things like that. So I ended up in C Company, 1st Shore Party, 7th Regiment, 1st Marine Division. And we were at Camp Lejeune, where we, Camp Pendleton, where we were training. And the next thing we know, we're aboard a ship on our way to Japan, we thought. Mm-hmm. We got to Japan, and this was in September 1950. And we got to Japan, I think it was Kobe, Japan, and they started unloading our sea bags and things like that. I don't know whether you know what a sea bag is.
Tell me.
It's a duffel bag,
Mm-hmm.
you know, with clothes and personal items. And we were unloading them on these little small vessels, and they were taken ashore. We were never allowed to leave the ship. We didn't even dock. And that night we were out to sea again. And the next thing, we really didn't know, at least the enlisted people didn't know where we were going. And then a day or so later they had these briefings, and everybody knew now we were going to a place called Incheon in South Korea, the capital, I think, not the capital, in Incheon. And as we approached, they were bombarding the shore. And the 1st and the 5th Marines, I think it was the 1st Marine Regiment, were making the assault. My regiment, we landed the day after the initial assault, so we did pretty good. And we fought our way to the capital city of Seoul. And we crossed the Han River, and we were fighting in the city of Seoul for 3 or 4 days, whatever it was to take the city. And following that, somewhere around mid-September, we were transported back to Incheon, and we boarded ships again. And this time we were heading to North Korea, a place called Wonsan in North Korea. And my regiment were the ones that were going to be the shock assault, first guys to land. And I guess we were kind of fortunate in that the harbor at Wonsan was heavily mined. And so we went up and down the coast for about 10 days. And after the Navy had cleared out the mines, and we made the amphibious landing at Wonsan. It wasn't a normal landing, it was an assault landing, but that's the way it was scheduled, but there was nobody shooting at us, so we were quite fortunate there. And the rumor went around that Bob Hope, I don't know whether you know who he was, a comedian with the USO, mm-hmm. was there to meet our regiment. I didn't personally get to see him, but I'm sure he was there. And then we were traveling north, fighting north, and we were fighting the North Koreans. And for me, at my age at that time, it was, really trauma, but to the more experienced Marines that had served World War II, it was just, you know, a little trip. And then we got to a place called the Chosen Reservoir, Changjiang. I don't know whether you ever heard of the place. But before we got up there, the weather was really, really bad.
Was it cold or?
Cold, 20 and 30 and more below zero, night and day. And we knew that the Chinese had entered the war because we started to sustain casualties. It was just, but when we got to the reservoir, we were really engaged in battle with them. They attacked us pretty bad. And we were in the mountains, and
What kind of weapons were y'all using?
well, we had a machine gun. We had, you know, M1s, rifles, and 30 caliber machine guns, and it was a little disorganized in that the M30, the machine gun used belted ammunition, but the ammunition we got was linked ammunition, so we had to, you know, take care of that. But anyhow, we were hit pretty hard by the Chinese, and we didn't lose any ground. I know we sustained a lot of casualties as the Chinese did, I'm sure.
Do you remember what the odds were? How many troops against the Chinese?
Yeah, well, division-wise, we were under strength. We didn't have, you know, full command of, full, I think there were about 3 or 4 divisions. I mean, about 5 to 10 to 1, the odds. And I think it was Chesty Puller, one of the regimental commanders. I didn't hear it. It just, history that I read, stated that when he was interviewed about being surrounded, and that his comment was, we're not retreating, we're just attacking in a different direction, which is true. So we fought our way back, and it seemed like every minute, every day, you were seeing rifle fire, and from the hills, and it was, I remember running. We started receiving small arms fire from the side of the hill, and I saw what appeared to be an old German grenade. It was kind of looked like a potato masher. They had them from World War II. And I remember seeing it, and I just couldn't do anything because I had this belted ammunition. We all carried, you know, machine gun ammunition around us, so feet on guns. And I remember I was midair when I saw it, and I just, you know, I couldn't maneuver. And then it blew up, and then I woke up, and I didn't feel any injury, but I remember I was looking up the hill, and I guess the convoy was starting to move again, and sounds kind of silly, but I thought I was going to Valhalla.
You're going to where?
Valhalla. I thought I was dead.
Ah.
I look until I started to, my tongue was half cut off. My mouth was loaded with blood, and I remember I started to choke, and I started to feel. Then the corpsman came along and, you know, picked up the casualties, and we ended up at Hungnam, Hungnam, the 2 cities. We went through their lines. The army was up there, and they had the perimeter, and we boarded ships towards the end of December of 1950. And I ended up on a hospital ship, but they were really short of people, so I went right back. And that was it. That was my career.
So it was that, I mean, would you say that was probably the most serious battle that you had been engaged in?
In Korea, yes,
Mm-hmm.
there's no question about it. It was amazing that the Marines were able to fight their way out of that. It was one of the fiercest battles under the weather conditions, 20 and 30 below zero.
Yeah.
You know.
You were telling me earlier that you had frostbite.
Yes, my hands and feet were frostbitten, and some people just laid down and never woke up. You know, frozen, just like an ice cube.
Was that kind of common to happen? It was kind of something unusual?
No, it wasn't uncommon. It wasn't common, but it wasn't unusual.
Yeah.
So we sustained, I think, more casualty from the weather than we did from the Chinese. So, and I've always experienced, you know, some pain in the winter.
Mm-hmm.
So.
So you were injured, you were wounded, and you said that you thought you were going to die. You were laying there. Oh, I mean, how did you manage? Did you get up on your own?
No, I was laying there. My feet were up, kind of on the high side of the ground. My head was back. My helmet was wrapped around my neck, and my helmet was on the back of my head and off my head. And when I woke up, I didn't feel anything. I looked up, and I saw the columns starting to move.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought they were all going to heaven or something. That's kind of silly. But I started to gag my blood.
Right.
And I started to kind of cough out. And we had these medics, corpsmen. They were Navy guys that served with the Marines. And they were picking up all the casualties and the guys got killed. And I started to cough, and they grabbed me and helped me. And I didn't even go aboard one of the trucks. We had so many casualties and so many guys that got killed on the trucks, on the chain, on the back. You know, I held on to it while the truck was moving, and that went on for about 2 or 3 days. And then I went back to my unit. So, it was an experience, I promise you that.
So did your experience in Korea end because you were injured? Or you said that was the end of it?
No, that was
Or just
we continued to fight our way back, and then after a couple of days, I went back to my unit. Not that we were separated or anything like that, but it was safer being with my guys than it was being with the trucks. So, yeah, we got to Hungnam or Hamhung, I forgot which, kind of a port city. And we came through Army lines, and there were just literally thousands of civilians. Didn't know where they came from. They were being loaded aboard ships, and then I went to a hospital ship they had on port there because of my injuries. Mm-hmm. And then I went back to South Korea and started fighting again. So that was it. And then I was injured again, and this time I was evacuated. Ended up in a hospital at San Diego,
How are you injured?
I got just by fire, you know, I don't know, napalm or something. So that was it. And then I ended up coming back home and started my career. And then I received a commission, and then I had to revert back to my highest enlisted rank because of, you know, they had enough officers, and I didn't have all the wherewithal. All I had was a high school diploma. So, and that's how I ended up in the Army after 10 years.
Have you been back to Korea by any chance?
As a matter of fact, yes. When they had the first groups of veterans going over there, I received a call and asked me if I was interested in joining them. And there was a group of Marines, some of which were with the Korean War veterans here. And it was, we flew there, and we flew to Incheon. And I remember going over, there was an island there that I landed at that didn't exist. It was part of the airport. And in my outfit, they didn't wear clothes as we wear them. They wore these robes and these kind of hats when you got to see them. The war was very, very intense at that time. The civilians I saw, it looked like they come out of a movie or something. They didn't look good, don't get me wrong, but you know, the costumes, but they were regular clothes.
Right.
This time when we went over there, I just couldn't believe that the city of Seoul, which is the capital, was like being in New York City.
What year did you go back to Korea?
Well, I knew you were going to ask me that. About 5, maybe 6 years ago.
Yeah, so you, I mean, were you just amazed at how much it had grown?
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
And they took us up to the border with North Korea and South Korea. And the mountains, or the hills, I guess the mountains, when I was there, they had these trenches surrounding, but the vegetation there was just beautiful. But I was utterly amazed that it was like being in New York City or in Houston.
Yeah, it was massive. So.
Oh, another thing, wherever we went, I was just with a small group. We had a little time, and I just don't, it was kind of a campus or something. It was on a weekend. And we had a Korean guide showing us this and showing us that, kind of on a tour. And you always saw little groups of kids, just little kids. And as we walked by them, America, you know, number one, America number one, you know, that was, that stood out in my mind, wherever we went, when they knew that we were Americans. In those days, they didn't have the tours as they have them now.
Yeah.
So that was very moving.
Do you think it's important for younger generations to know the sacrifices and what happened during the Korean War?
I'm sorry.
Do you think it's important for younger generations and for others to know of what happened in Korea?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's no question about that. Armistice Day or whenever these holidays come about, you don't hear about the Korean War so much, but you don't hear anything about the Vietnam War.
Why do you think that is?
I have no idea. Political, I think. And I'm really appreciative of the memories that the Korean people have of what sacrifices we made, and the growth and the development of South Korea as we know it makes it worthwhile.
I agree.
So, but what you're doing here now is really nice, really great.
Well, thank you. We appreciate that. We're hoping that this is important and necessary, and we believe so. So, thank you so much for coming in and talking to me, sir.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it.